Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Odhinns School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you for joining me today. It's good to see you. This has been a wild ride. I feel a bit like the universe has been making this super difficult to get this video out. I probably recorded this about a month ago, but then it wouldn't export. And then it wouldn't upload. And then it wouldn't post. And even my friend and colleague, Alex, who does the Seder videos in astrology, her video didn't post. So I don't know if there's something going on or not, but there feels like there's something going on. And then like today, I come out to record again the same content, and there's a street sweeper outside being really loud, and I've been waiting for about 20 minutes for it to leave, and I think I'm just gonna have to say screw it. It's been a bit, you know. I know it's been a while. But here it comes. I don't know if you could hear it. I'm using headphones, so I don't know if you could hear it or not, but it's loud. It's loud on my end anyway. But yeah, life has been crazy, and it's been hard, but you know, we've been doing all right. I really want to say thank you. I don't want to out any names on YouTube, of course, but you know who you are. It really means a lot to me for those of you who emailed and wrote and Discorded me, asking how I've been and what I'm doing and if I'm okay and all of those things. You know who you are, and it really means a lot that you did that. That was a very kind thing to do. And when you do this kind of thing, when you're online, you don't really ever know not just who's listening to your content, but who it's actually touching, and you just don't know that, you know. And so it just really meant a lot, is what I'm trying to say. So without further ado, I'm going to make sure this explode on me. I'm going to pour myself a little bit of port. By a little bit of port, I mean I'm going to fill my mug here. Because these videos are important, and it's having I consider it kind of like a ritual, and a religious use of alcohol in our faith is pretty common, and I use it that way. Just don't become a slave to it. Become a slave to it, it becomes wrong. But if you're treating it respectfully, you're doing it well, then it's not bad. So, to my friends, thank you. It's good to be back. This video is not going to be quite as exciting as my other one that I tried to post, because the other one I tried to make fancy. I was doing a slideshow and had things popping up on the screen and music and all of that, but that just didn't work. So I'm gonna go back to my roots, keep it real simple, and just talk to a camera, just like the old way. I've often said, and those of you who have been with me a while have remembered, that the mysteries, particularly in occultism, have always been taught orally. It's one of those things that have, as like the Kabbalion, like to quote the Kabbalion, from mouth to ear. You know, it gets passed down through the people, the initiates, and Hierophants will teach the neophytes, and the neophytes will teach the initiates, and then eventually the masters will die off, and the hierophants take their place, and everyone, the chain kind of just goes down from there. And that's the way I was taught. I was taught orally, in conversations just like this, only without the camera. And so this is a convenient workaround, this kind of format. So going back to the roots, I think, is important. You don't have, for those of you who are visual learners, you don't have the benefit of the visuals, which could be really annoying. Sometimes I've just written things down and just held it up to the camera. I'm not going to do that today. I will, if it becomes a problem, let me know, and I'll see if I could do something to help. Of course, you could always email me. My email is in the community tab on my channel page. Feel free to email me at any time. And I'm always available for questions. So without further ado, I know I've been talking for 6 minutes. Let's get into it. So I want to talk about, this is about astrotheology particularly. More specifically, it's about Odin's solar aspect. We've talked a lot about Odin being a wisdom god, and we've talked a lot about Odin being like a shaman and all those kinds of things. And those kinds of archetypes. We haven't talked about Odin's solar aspect before. And one of the things that it's important to keep in mind is that, and I've said this like a million times, and I say this in almost every video, it seems like, but it's one of those dead horses that are good to kick all the time, because it's important that people understand that multiple things are true at the same time, and truth has a way of bleeding out through all the layers of causality. So if it's true on one level, like if it's truly true on one level, you'll start to see it not only in mythology, but in the stars and mathematics and electromagnetism and all in sound waves and all of that. Suddenly it just starts showing up everywhere, because truth is truth, and it's like a source code, like in the Matrix or whatever. It's one of those source codes, those base codes that forms a lot of substance underneath it or above it. It's the foundation for everything that's built on top of it. So the dying god myths and wisdom gods are almost always have solar aspects to them, because the sun is one of our primary wisdom symbols, because it produces light. Light is that thing which illuminates the world, right? It's that most important thing that makes the crops grow, that makes the birds come out. If we didn't have sunlight, things die, and we wouldn't live for very long. And so we depend on the sun. And so from the most ancient reaches of mankind, the sun has been a really important symbol. It's been one of those things that are that have come out in, how would you say, that's been revered in mythology from the dawn of time. Interestingly enough, solar deities have never gotten, they're always like you see like an A-list actor. They've always been like a C-list actor, or maybe a D-list actor. Their myths were always very small, and they were never really, weirdly enough, they were never really the top of the roster. And I don't know if this was by design or if this is just the way it goes, but the most important things are usually not the most important in popular culture. So, it's called a blind. We've talked about blinds before. A blind is where you put an over amount of emphasis on wrong or misleading information so that someone would come to the wrong conclusion. It's a bit like when dietitians were saying fat was the worst thing ever. And if you eat fat, then you're just going to die immediately. And so we had all those fat-free products that were coming out. And so I could take this, 50-pound bag of sugar and put it right in front of you. And I could say, congratulations, fat is bad. And this giant 50-pound bag of sugar is 100% fat-free. Right? That is technically true, but incredibly misleading. Because if you eat that 50-pound bag of sugar, you're going to get fat. There's just no getting around it. You're going to get fat. But that's kind of how blinds work. Blinds are a little bit the same thing, where, you put a lot of emphasis. Like the really popular gods were always like the war gods and, the sex gods and all these ones that are really a lot of fun for people, but aren't particularly good for enlightenment. And so the solar deities were always kind of half forgotten, kind of in the back of the drawer. Shamash he ran around with Gilgamesh in the Epic of Gilgamesh. He wasn't one of the really popular deities back in Sumer. Marduk was. Marduk was like, that's our guy, and likewise Anu, who was like the king of the gods, wasn't as popular as people thought. Even in our religion, in Norse mythology, Odin, Tyr was the head god for a long time until Odin came on the scene. So for whatever reason, these deities are often kind of forgotten. And then if they're not forgotten, they're totally twisted out of proportion. One of the worst myths and the worst offenders of this is Odin as a war god. And we've talked about this before. Odin being a war god. Well, it's all well and good to say that, but when you start to read the source material, war is not his big driver in the world at all. Wisdom is his big driver, and then by necessity, preparation for Ragnarok is the second most important driver. And so his war component comes out of it's a means to an end rather than the end itself. Like Thor, you would say, yeah, that is definitely a war god. Right? He loves war for the sake of war. He loves bloodshed for the sake of bloodshed. He's literally a hammer in search of a nail. Right? I got a little hammer in search for a nail here. But that's a definition of a war god. Ninurta, going back to Sumer, was a war god, right? Loved violence for the sake of violence sake. And so it's hard when you want to talk about, like, let's say, like Odin's solar side of it, because there's really, I have never come across it in any books or sources or anything like that. No one ever talks about it. It's one of those forgotten episodes in Norse mythology, and I think that is just so... It's both predictable, and it's both just really disheartening and sad at the same time, because it's super obvious once you start knowing what you're looking at. So the way it works is you have a solar wheel. I'm going to use I have a plate here. We'll just use this as an example. So you have a solar wheel, right? And then you have winter solstice. If you look up solar wheels online, they always put Yule at the top. Yule doesn't belong at the top. Yule belongs down here in the underworld. I don't know why they do. Oh, there we go. I don't know why they do that, but it belongs down here. Yule is down here. And you have a cross section through here, and you have an up and down section through here. So then you have the 4 seasons, right? And then each of these is cut in half. So then you have the summer solstice, winter solstice, and then this would be, trying to do this backwards. So I think if I'm looking at it over here, I think this would be, I might be pointing this out backwards, but then you have the spring equinox over here, and then the fall equinox over here. So for now, because of precession, up here in the summer solstice, the sun always gets to its highest point in Cancer. And then I think he gets to his lowest point in Scorpio's right here. And now for some reason I can't. I always do these without notes. So I'm not, sometimes I just forget. I forget what comes after Scorpio. My friend Alex, when she's gets around to watching this, will be screaming at the screen, no doubt. Anyway, so, and then you have 12 astrological signs that goes around the outside of this. And each sign plays a part. And as time goes on, every 72 years, due to the Earth's wobble and precession, every 72 years, the whole thing turns a little bit. And that's called precession. And so it takes something like, what was it? 2,300 years or something like that to get from one sign to the other sign, to the end of one sign to the beginning of the other sign. And that 72 year span is really important. And it's referenced all the time, especially if you're familiar with biblical numerology. It's everywhere. 72 is encoded in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid in Giza. It's freaking everywhere. In the myth of the murder of Osiris, Set murders Osiris, and Set has 72 conspirators. That's because 72 years is the amount of time from 1 degree change to the next degree change. It's complicated, right? It's complicated. If you don't get it, it's fine. You're not stupid. It's just complicated, right? There's a very intricate clock here with a lot of moving parts, and it doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means that it's complicated. I've had the benefit of studying this for years, and my friend Alex, the one who's really, this is her school, she's way more advanced in it than I am. But there's just a lot of moving parts, and you don't have to know all those parts in order to understand what we're talking about here. I just wanted to do a brief run through so that we're all on the same page. So over time, the sun moves from one astrological sign to the other. So eventually, at some point, Cancer won't be the height of the sun's powers anymore. It will be some other sign. But here's the important thing. Each sign represents a god. And so every sign represents the time of darkness and then the time of light. So as the years go on, that clock will move, and each sign will play the role, just like an actor, of the birth of the sun. Each one will play so spring equinox, the sign that's at present at the spring equinox, plays the birth of the sun. The sign that's at the top of the wheel, where the sun is the height of its powers, is the sign that plays the sun itself. And then the sign that plays at the fall equinox represents the god who kills the sun. So so summer solstice. The summer solstice is the one who plays at the height of his powers, the sun at the height of his powers, and the fall equinox plays the one who murders the sun. And then the sign that's at the very bottom represents the rebirth of the sun, which happens on December 25th. Okay, is that clear as mud to everybody? I know it's complicated. So you have a bunch of gods, you have 12 deities, and each deity plays a role. They act out a play. Just like that famous Shakespeare line that said I'm not going to be able to remember it. The world is a stage and all of us are merely players, that sort of thing. It's just like that. It's exactly like that. So but that's how astrotheology starts to, it's under that construct, the astrotheology begins to work. Now, astrotheology is a word that a lot of people haven't heard. And if it's a word that you haven't heard, you got to get acquainted with this, because so much of what we call mythology is based around, has astrotheological roots. So astro is a word this is where we get the word like astronomer from, and astronaut, and astrology, and astroturf, and all of this stuff. But it basically means sky. Right? It's a word that means sky, the things that live in the heavens. Theos is a Greek word. Theos is a word that means God, basically, the Heavenly Father. So when Jesus in the New Testament, if you're a Christian and you read when Jesus says, no one has seen my Father, no one comes to the Father except through me, and all that. The word he uses right there is actually a Greek word called theos. Just means God. And ology means study of. So ology is like, where we have like biology and theology and, I don't know, all the ologies. And so, so that's kind of important to understand, right? So astrotheology, if we put it all together, is basically the movement of the gods in the skies, right? The celestial heavens, the things that live and work in the sky. So it would be no surprise if truth is one of those things like we established that is like a code that manifests things all above it. That every myth and every god has an astrotheological side to it. Creation is always fractal. It's always this thing that there's a pattern, a mathematical pattern that starts at the source, and then it all kind of extrapolates. The same patterns all play out as you go. So astrotheology is all those patterns that are present in the sky, that plane of existence, which have other patterns that support it all the way through, looking through truth all the way up to, what's like really in front of you like this. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense or not. I hope it does. You can always email me if you have any questions you want me to elaborate. So, Odin, being a wisdom god, wisdom gods and solar deities are always almost one and the same thing. They all have their astrotheological roots, particularly around the sun, because the sun is like the enlightenment, right? Your pineal gland, they always have that picture of look at it, like most of the superheroes. Go look at the superhero images. Almost all of them will have a headband with a star or something right here on the front of their forehead. That's not on accident. That's there because that is trying to represent, it's like the modern version of a saint, right? You see those old Christian paintings with the halos. It's kind of the modern version of that, where it's saying this person is sanctified. This person is enlightenment. This person represents, the highest set of morals society could have, right? This is the person who's going to stand up for the weak and embody all of these, all the things that, that society holds really important to themselves. So they always have like a star or something right here on their foreheads. Just go look. Everyone has it. It just is what it is. Particularly Marvel superheroes have it a lot. So Odin has all of his stories all center around these astrotheological symbolism of the sun and what the sun is doing as it goes around the year, right? So, Odin starts his journey for the runes and he climbs up the world tree. This being the year wheel is called the Holy Mountain. And it's also called the World Tree. Enlil in Sumerian mythology was called the god of the mountain, or god of the Cedar Mountain. That's what it was. The year wheel is the Cedar Mountain. And so the sun will start its journey, gets to the height of its powers. Odin seeks enlightenment because he's at the highest point. He goes and then he gets stuck on the world tree, gets hung on the world tree. Again, I might be doing this backwards. But he gets hung on the world tree. And then he dies on the world tree until he sees the runes down here in the underworld, in the waters of the underworld. He sees it. And then he is reborn and then begins his astrotheological journey back up the world tree, out of the underworld, and then comes back up to the top where he regains his first estate. Right? All mystery school symbolism all centers around this dying god myth. And it's not just about the chosen dying god, I come through the Odinic school, and so the Odinic school focuses on the Odinic dying god myth. Sticking with the Norse mystery schools, if you come out of the Baldric school of Norse mysteries, well then your dying god myth is the death and resurrection of Baldur, the sun god. Kisavir, I can never pronounce his name. The god of poetry is the same thing. Theseus, same thing. If you're a Mason, your dying god myth is the myth of Hiram Abiff, the death and resurrection of the Master Mason, Hiram Abiff. If you were part of the cult of Ishtar or Inanna, her dying god myth is actually one of my favorites, but her descent into the underworld and her resurrection out of it is a dying god myth too. That was your dying god myth. If you're a Theseus fan, it's one of my favorite dying god myths of all time. Theseus descends into the underworld with a rope and slays death in the dark underworld labyrinth, and then comes back up. So, the dying god myths are everywhere, but they're all analogous to the sun, right? So we're dealing with different layers of truth causality as it comes down to us through all the different sections of creation. And I know that's a lot. It's one of those things you really have to take the time and just meditate on, because I understand it, because I've literally probably by this point spent 10,000 hours in study. That's not really an exaggeration. I've just been doing it for a long time, and so the moving parts make a lot of sense. And that's not to say I don't want to have anyone have any illusions that I'm some sort of master of mysteries or anything like that. I'm no master. I just am fairly familiar with the territory, is all I'm trying to say. So we have the Odinic dying god myth of the world tree, but one of the most important astrotheological myths when we're dealing with Odin is the loss of his eye. It's one of his more famous stories that he's involved with, and it's one of those stories that people have simply forgotten, not because they forgot the actual story, but because they forgot what it means. And it's gonna mean a lot of things, but no one has any idea that it has anything to do with the sun. And that's what's really fascinating. That's the thing that makes me go, woo! It's just a lot of fun. It's just one of those things that I can't get enough of it, So there's the idea of the one-eyed god. We're all familiar. Well, I don't know if we're all familiar, but there's this famous line that says, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." Very, very heavily loaded, esoteric statement. If you pause this video and you go Google that, they're going to give you the most ridiculous answer ever. If you want to talk about gaslighting and, let's say, not creating a blind, Google it and see what you find. Because it's only going to say, like, in the land of people who are handicapped, the one who is slightly less handicapped is actually the one who's the most able, or something like that. No, it has absolutely nothing to do with handicapped people, and everything to do with enlightenment, having one eye, being enlightened, having the sun, right, possessing the sun, being a child of the sun. Yeah, you always heard of the term like the son of the morning star. I am the bright and morning star. Lucifer is said to be the bright and morning star. Jesus calls himself the bright and morning star. In the King James version, in the last chapter of Revelation, he calls himself Lucifer. So those of you who are running around saying that Lucifer is the devil, you have some serious reconciliation to do there, I think, because Jesus calls himself Lucifer. And I don't think many Christians would make the argument that Jesus is the devil. Be that as it may, possessing the sun, being enlightened, having one eye, being able to think, having a unified mind, is paramount. Jesus, we're just talking about Jesus, even says it's better that your eye be single. Talks about if your right eye offends you, pluck it out and throw it away. Having one eye. If you have duality, if you're caused to see two different things, if you see everything in black and white, you're dualistic. You have a vision of two. You want to have a vision of one. So I think let's take a second and just go over. I mean, it'll only take a second just to tell the story of how Odin loses his eye, because I think it's really important. So it starts off the same way. Odin wants wisdom. Almost all of his stories start off that way. And so he finds out, like almost all the stories, that there's this way to gain wisdom. Mimir, which is the modern Mercury, is a god who possesses a well of enlightenment. What's the well of enlightenment? It's the sun. The sun is the well of enlightenment. And Mimir guards the well. Mercury is the closest planet from the sun. So Odin goes out there, goes on a long journey, and goes to the well of Mimir. And he asks Mimir, "Let me have a drink of your well." And Mimir says, "There's a cost. You have to have one eye to drink from the well." So Odin agrees to pay the price, and so he plucks out an eye, drops it in the well of wisdom. And then he takes a drink called the Gallarhorn. Now, in mystery school philosophy, any pointy object is always a symbol for wisdom. Spear, sword, bow, horn, drinking from horned mugs. Well, this doesn't have a point on it, but you get the point. You get the point. See? It's not an accident that's a term that's used. Do you get the point? Do you have enlightenment? Right? Thoth called it the three-pointed pathway. It's that eye in the pyramid. These things aren't on accident, you guys. These are all really important things. Right? These are important things to remember and understand. So he drinks from the pointy object. He drinks from the three-pointed pathway. He drinks from the holy mountain. He drinks from the obelisk. He drinks from all of these things are all symbols. Drinks from the holy pyramid. And so he drinks the light of wisdom, and then wisdom floods into him. And now, because he's no longer dwelling in darkness, he has one eye. He's not seeing cross-eyed anymore. Cross-eyed. He's not seeing two images. He's seeing one image. He has one eye. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. When everyone is dwelling in darkness, the man with one eye is the one who can really see. That's important to keep in mind. So, water. Water is really important in mystery school symbolism. Water almost always represents both the sacred feminine and the night sky. It represents both those things at the same time. It represents two things are true at the same time. It's because a woman's water, right? If you've ever had sex, if you know anything about childbirth, water is really important to the biology of a female. And there's a lot of biology that involves fluids, bodily fluids coming out, bodily fluids going in, body fluids accumulating inside to give birth. right? When she gives birth, there's a release of water. You've heard of the Holy See in Catholicism. It's the night sky. It's the night mother. And it's another one of those blinds that, because of Hollywood and misinformation, everyone hears night mother or the lady in black or anything like that kind of stuff. And they think ghouls and goblins and vampires and all of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean that at all. Which is why the sacred feminine is always called the underworld. It's why Easter always happens at the first full moon on the first Sunday after the spring equinox. And Christians will say, oh, it's not pagan, it's about Jesus. Absolutely not. Well, actually, no, that's not true. It is totally about Jesus, because Jesus is actually a solar deity. But Christians, they have no idea how pagan their religious beliefs are. They're incredibly pagan. They just don't know it. Right. So when Jesus is born and comes into his full power, is when he descends out of the underworld of winter and comes into the light of the world, becomes the light of the world. That phraseology is not used on accident. And so the idea of night is really important. In Egyptian mythology, Nut, the goddess who is the night sky, was always said to be the goddess who wears lapis lazuli. Her clothes are lapis lazuli. Because if you pause the video and you go Google lapis lazuli, you'll see that it looks like the night sky. It's like this beautiful dark blue stone. It looks like the night sky, and there's a reason why that stone is associated with all of these goddesses, from Mary to Frigg to Nut to all the way through Persephone. Same thing. She represents the same thing. Ouch. Keep sliding down in my chair. So the water in both of Odin's, well, essentially they're both dying god myths. People will often argue with me that they're not, because Odin doesn't croak. But they are basically dying god myths. Theseus is the same thing. He doesn't technically die in the story, but it is very obvious that it's a dying god myth. It's just a hidden one. So in both of Odin's myths, water is present. And you'll know this. You have the wells. You have, I think there's like something like 3 wells in Norse mythology. And in the myths that we have left, he visits 2 of them. And I can guarantee you 100% that there was, at least at some point in history, a myth where he visited the other one. I could almost guarantee it 100%. I would bet even that when he goes to see the seer, in regards to his brother, into his son's dreams, because Baldur's having these terrible nightmares before his murder. I can almost guarantee you, probably one of the earlier versions that probably had him visiting a well to see the seer. Anyway, so the Holy See is the night sky. It's the place where Odin goes. Because this is what we're talking about. This is all all of this is the night sky. We're talking about the night sky here. The sun exists on the night sky. Mercury or Mimir exists in the night sky. So if we're following this train of logic, if all of these represent celestial bodies, what object represents his eye, his other eye, the one he drops in the holy well? Come on. It's the moon. It's the moon. It's the dead eye. The moon is exactly the same size as the sun. It produces no light of its own. It's the one that was plucked out. It's the offending eye. It's the one that was sacrificed to get enlightenment. So in Norse esotericism, in Germanic esotericism, the sun and the moon represent Odin's eyes. One is the living eye that shines with flame, and one is the dead eye that was murdered and thrown away. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? I think it's really cool. That's not to say that there aren't other gods who also represent the sun and the moon, right? We know this. There's a bunch of them. A couple female gods, a couple male gods. This is very common. Multiple gods representing multiple celestial bodies at the same time. But we're speaking specifically about the Odinic astrotheology system from an Odinic mystery school perspective. And the Odinic mystery school perspective on this particular myth is that we are talking about the sun and the moon, the two lights of the world, the greater light and the lesser light. The moon doesn't produce any light of its own. It's all reflected light. It's the dead eye. And so if you follow the lunar cycle, the sky is empty. Odin starts carving out his eye, as gruesome as that might sound. And then you have an eye that slowly starts to, materialize in the night sky until it's fully there. And so, going back to Mimir and his well, later on, presumably later on in the story, there's the big war between the Asir and the Vanir, and then Mimir, the wisdom god, the original wisdom god, Odin's teacher, was murdered. Wisdom gods always die. Always. No exceptions. There is no exceptions to this rule. They always die. Gandalf dies. I mean, freaking every wisdom god dies. Solar gods and wisdom gods will always die. They're always murdered. Always. Either by their own ignorance or by someone else's ignorance, they die. Shamash? No. Who am I thinking of? One of those early sun gods was literally murdered by his own demons. Right. I mean, you can't Dumuzi, same, runs off a cliff into the underworld, into the sacred sea, right? It's like you can't make this shit up. It's like water's always there. But, so Mimir is murdered, right? And then his head is taken to his teacher, or not his teacher, I'm sorry, his student, who's now ascended to the rank of wisdom god by this point. He's now the head of the pantheon. He's the wisdom god of the Old Norse. And so he takes his teacher and he rubs herbs and stuff on it, right? Does some magic, all that kind of stuff. And then the head starts talking again. Excuse me. And then so Odin takes his teacher back to his well and puts Mimir's head in the sacred well, back up into the night sky. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the solar system and stuff, Mercury and Venus and the Sun, all those objects that operate inside the inner solar system, are all called sons of the morning because they all appear in the morning. Because the way the mathematics works is like if this is my earphone case, but like if this is a circle, pretend this is a circle, and anyway, so here we are. Here's the circle, right? And so if we're here, the only way to see the inner solar system, if the sun's down here, is like my bracelet, right? If this is the inner solar system, this is like where the sun rotates and stuff. The only way to see down into the bracelet is right here. You have to look past and through the inside of the atmosphere. You can't look straight up. You have to look past through the atmosphere down behind the earth. And so all those gods, Mimir and Freya, Mercury and Venus, they're called sons of the morning because the only way to see them is either at dusk time or at dawn. Because you have to look, they're always right above the horizon. You have to look through the horizon to see it. That's why Venus, Freya, all these people are always depicted as ships. Because of the way that the only way to see it is through the inside of the earth, they always appear as like a crescent shape. They always have this crescent moon shape. And so it could be really confusing when you're to decide which symbol we're actually looking at when you see a crescent moon, because it doesn't always mean the moon. It actually means most of the time, it also means Venus. So anyway, going back to what I was saying, Mercury or Mimir always lives in this nether state. It's not light, it's not dark. It's the middle road. It's that place of unified consciousness. Unified consciousness. One eye. Not two, one. One eye. One eye that produces light. And so, in the twilight, in the undeath, in that place where you're not, how do you put it? It's like the original undead, basically. That's Mimir, right? You know, he was murdered. He lives, his body is dead, but his soul is ever living because he's bathed in the light of the sun. And so he operates in those two sides, right? Freya is kind of in the same boat because she lives in the sacred feminine, that dark underworld, right? So these things are really, I think they're really cool, but there's a lot of moving parts in here. And the symbolism, if you pay attention and you know what you're reading, is actually very clever. It's very, very, very clever. Someone who is way smarter than me came up with this stuff. Probably not a man, but probably a god, because there's no way that we could come up with something that cool without it being told to us. You know, these things are really important. And so this is kind of the but this is what astrotheology is this kind of knowledge, this kind of thing that is stories that are, they're, well, I would say all myth, not even just astrotheological myths, but all myth, are stories that are designed to be a trap for fools and a light to the wise. Because people who get so stuck in the dogma, who are so bound and determined to believe the litericity, the historicity of these documents, will forever be stuck in darkness. But if you're willing to think outside the box and say, what are these ancient people really saying here? Then you begin to see not just, I mean, yes, it's beautiful and there's this wonderful myths that are multi-layered and which are fantastic, but you begin to understand that there's something more going on here, right? And it's not just the Norse myths that are like this. There's some sort of story, some sort of great mystery here that is being completely missed because people are so stuck in their boxes. And that's what's really discouraging. Because there's no reason why you have to be stuck in a box. You don't have to be stuck in a box. We are sitting, those of us who follow the Norse side of things, are sitting on such a gold mine of profundity that it's frankly impossible to even explain in words. There is so much here that it is astounding. But people miss it because they want to follow the modern pop culture version of Norse belief systems. Because, you know, there's a bravado to it, because they want to be the biggest swinging dick in the store, you know, and that's the thing that's really tough, is that you don't need any of that stuff because there's so much more here than being, you know, some egotistical jackass. And that's really hard, because, I mean, I've people have gotten mad at me, you know. They say I'm not a true polytheist, or that I'm not a true Norse pagan because of something, right? I'm not a true anything, and I'll be the first person to tell you that. I seek the truth. I want the truth. And the truth speaks to me through the Norse system. And I don't or won't just be something just because it's the cool club to be in. I'm a part of things because it's important to me to know the truth, to understand there's a bigger story here. There's a bigger mystery here. And people miss that. They miss it because they want to, you know, become just like the Christians and sit on their high horses and say, you know, you're not a true Christian because you don't believe in immaculate conception, or you're burned forever in hell, or you're not a true Christian because you don't speak in tongues, or you're not a true Christian because you don't worship on Saturday or Sunday or whatever day, you know. It's all of that is just nonsense. It's total, complete nonsense. But, you know, it's the same sort of thing. I propose that we are Norse pagans, not because we want to be like Christianity, but because we want to know the truth. And I pick on Christianity a lot because I have a lot of history with Christianity. And, I have known some real Christians who are real people, who are really good and who are really interested in the truth. And the truth speaks to them through Christianity. And I have no problems with those people. They're awesome people. I respect the hell out of people who really want to know the truth. And if the truth comes to them through Jesus Christ, so be it. Right? I have no issue with that. I have an issue with dogmatism, where you don't worship the God, you worship the church. You don't worship God, you listen to man. Listen to what men tell you. If what I say at any point doesn't bear itself out, you go do your own research, go read your source material, go do whatever you need to do. And if what I say doesn't turn out to be true or it becomes a lie, you could wash your hands of me and walk away knowing you've avoided a lie or a moron. If what I say bears itself out, well, then you know that I've spoken truth and you're all the better for it. Dogma kills people. It's the thing that kills people and drowns them in the underworld. Right? It's not it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And so, in order to understand really what we're talking about here, you have to be able to hold two ideas in your head at once. It's not just a story, it's describing something. These myths, they're describing something. It's not just a fun little adventure romp with Thor and an eagle and oryx and, trying to cook an oryx and stuff, which is the Thor and Loki. Loki gets carried off by the eagle. Well, the eagle is Scorpio. Scorpio is the scorpion. It's also an eagle, and it's also a phoenix. And so he gets carried off by an eagle while he's getting carried off by Scorpio. The bull they try to cook but can't. Right? That's Taurus. These aren't. There's something more that's going on here that is more than just a cool adventure romp. There's things that are happening here. It's describing something important, right? Loki turns himself into a fish when he's trying to avoid capture. He turns into Pisces, swimming around at the bottom of the river, right? The sky, the night sky. Water equals night sky. He turns himself into a fish in the water, turns himself into a fish in the night sky. These aren't accidents. These aren't just things that are just saying shit just because it sounds cool or whatever. They're describing something that's important. And if we're too caught up in our own bullshit to understand that we're trying to see that there's something important being said here, then we miss the glory and the beauty of our faith. And it's a deep sadness to me that people are missing the glory and the beauty of their own faith because they're too wrapped up in... I know I've been ragging on this for a long time, and I'm sorry. It just really frustrates me. I just want, what I want? I just want people to be free. I want you to be free. I want you to live as free men and free women and not be born into slavery. This system has lots of slaves. It forces people into mind control, to believe all kinds of crap, to... they demonize people who ask questions, who see patterns, and I want you to be born free and to come alive and to see the truth for what it is. And if you see the truth of Christianity, fine. I don't have any issue with that. What I do have an issue is mind control. I will not put up with it. And if you want to to be set free, you have to be willing to be wrong, and you have to be willing to say that there's something more going on here that I don't understand. And that's just really all there is to it. But I've seen the power and the glory of Odin being shown in the night sky over and over and over again. These stories come alive. The story of Odin and his two eyes is in a very similar vein to the story of the twins of in Mayan mythology, and it's super similar to the story of Autumn. Autumn, it sounds a bit like the not Autin, but Audim, just like if you think of it, say the season. It's kind of it's spelled slightly different, but it's the same god. Autumn is the same story, the old Egyptian god. And so, these stories are ancient. They're older than all of us. They're older than Egypt. They're older than the Norse people. They're older than the Mayan, Inca, and all the South American civilizations. They're older than India. Our lineage is the lineage of gods. And I'm not talking about, people are going to say that I'm talking about genealogy, like of your physical body. I'm talking about the genealogy of your spirit, where your spirit comes from, and the stories that gave us birth from the beginnings of the world. That is our history, and that's the history that matters. In any case, I know I've been rambling for a while, and I'm really sorry. And it's been over an hour, I think an hour and 6 minutes or so, according to my thingy. But I really hope that you all understand what I'm saying here. That there's more here. There's more to life. There's more to this whole thing. Ask the gods, whoever your personal gods are, ask them to teach you the truth, no matter what the cost. Ask it sincere and be sincere about it and see what happens. See if your life doesn't change. Because truth is like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. It wants to be found. It wants to be discovered. But, going back to the Bible, I know I've been quoting it a lot today, and I'm not going to apologize because I think it's good information, but I don't like to just quote one source over and over again. But King Solomon said that the glory of God is to hide a thing, and it's the joy of kings to discover it. That's kind of what I'm referring to here. It's the true strength and the power and the wonder and the majesty and the profundity and the ever-expanding glory of the gods is hidden. It's why Odin wears, when he goes into the world, he wears a cloak. I think I talked about that in a few videos ago. Wisdom is hidden. It's shrouded from view. It's not something that is just readily available to people. You have to want it, and you have to look for it. And every civilization, always in their mythology, has promises that if you bother to go find it, you will find it. But you have to first want to find it. And that's what's important to understand. You have to want to find the truth. You have to want to know who the real Odin is. Not what Hollywood says, not the popular way of it. You have to want to know who the gods are and have a personal relationships with them and discover the truth of their natures. Because there is so much beauty and excitement here that I can't even, there's just physically no way of putting it. There's just seriously no way of explaining it. It doesn't, the words just do not exist. Right? It's just ecstasy. Which is, I think, one of the names for Odin is just ecstasy. It's just that joy of finding the beautiful treasure, the hidden thing that is, like I said, there's just no words for it. You just can't put it into words. Anyway, I want to say thank you again for those people. Here's to you who wrote me and asked how I was doing. That really, truly did mean a lot to me. And you know who you are, and thank you. For the rest of you, I really appreciate the time that you've taken to hang out here. My email address is ofgungnir@gmail.com. You could find it, a link to it, in the community tab of this channel. Was it the community tab? Maybe it's the About tab. I don't remember. It's on one of the tabs. Just go click around, you'll find it. And always, of course, like and share and subscribe and click all the buttons, but not the down button. The down button is off limits. No down buttons. All right, folks. I love you all. Gods be with you. And be safe out there, my friends. Goodbye.